So let's get right into it. I get to introduce Kevin Schultz, who's been very instrumental in helping us get these network chats together. So thank you, Dr. Schultz. But Dr. Schultz is an associate professor and department chair of physics, as well as the coordinator of individual student program. He joined Hartford College in 2012. He holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Loyola University, Chicago, and a doctorate of philosophy from Stony Brook University. His background is in experimental atomic physics, and he has recently become active, very active, in local environmental issues and environmental education. You're in for a great treat. I lead it off to you, Dr. Schultz. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very, very thrilled that two of my students have accepted to come here. It's been great just seeing Mike and David again, so thank you all for putting this together. So our first guest is Dr. Susan Fueshko Perry. I probably botched that up. I practiced, but I did my best. She graduated from Hartwick, as we heard, in 1986 with a double major in biology and chemistry. She has been teaching at Lehigh University since 1999, where she has been a professor of practice and graduate program director at Lehigh's Department of Bioengineering. She is also a faculty advisor in Lehigh's Integrated Product Development Capstone Program and a member of the Pre-Health Advisory Committee. Her long-term research interests include understanding mechanisms guiding cell differentiation and cell migration for tissue engineering and biosensing applications. And recently, she has also focused her efforts on developing, testing, implementing, and promoting innovative approaches to engineering education. And I will have to ask you for some advice on starting a biophysics class. Next up on our list is Michael Servider. Mike graduated from Hartford College in 2016 with a major in physics and a minor in mathematics. He is currently a sales specialist for TFP, working technical fiber products, working with existing and potential customers to help find a solution to their composite needs. TFP is an advanced materials company that participates in a wide range of industries, from aerospace and defense to sporting goods. He works very closely with the customer's technical team to advise and recommend potential solutions. I am once again thrilled to see Mike once more. It has been too long. And finally, our third guest is David Velez, class of 2017. David is working as a software developer for Infosys, an Indian international technology consulting firm. He is contracted by Northwestern Mutual, a Fortune 500 life insurance company based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he is the associate developer in sales reporting. He provides second-tier support and acts as a subject matter expert for 3 enterprise web applications with thousands of users. He monitors application logs and metrics while analyzing and scripting code to collaborate on efforts to diagnose and resolve software bugs, system outages, and performance and access issues. Again, it's great to see you as well. I recently just came across some of our particle physics stuff that you and I worked on so many years ago. All right, so I am going to present each of you some questions and just take your turns going through that. Zoom is difficult enough to not override everybody, so maybe we just go down the list in the order that I presented, or not, whatever. It's all good. At any rate, so in 2 minutes, can you describe the high points, Susan, of your path from Hartwick to your current position, paying special attention to graduate school, or in the case of David, your professional development opportunities?
Oh, you are so putting me on the spot with the 2-minute time limit there, because if anyone who knows me knows that I can rarely say anything in less than 5 minutes. But
well, if you were only here yesterday, we wouldn't have that time limit. But.
I'll make it short. When I was a senior at Hartwick, I believe it was actually the first year that a biochemistry class was offered, and I was a biology major and a chemistry major, and I had an English minor thrown in there, and I liked both of those classes. But when I took biochemistry, wow, it brought them all together, and it made sense to me. And that was the beginning, right, for me. I, at that point in time, decided to apply to graduate school. That was not something, graduate school was not something that was in my, on my radar until senior year. And so it took me, you know, a little bit of time to piece together what I needed to do. I didn't really have much, I didn't have anyone around me other than professors. Obviously, they were a great resource, but I didn't have other students, too many students that were traveling down that path. I didn't have anyone in my family who had traveled down that path, and so it was all new to me. But I fortunately found a home at Penn State Hershey, which is a medical school and has a small portion of Penn State's graduate program there in biomedical sciences. And the nice thing about the program that I joined was that I was able to do rotations, lab rotations, before I chose my ultimate area of research. And not all graduate programs are like that, but this one was, and it was absolutely critical for me because I didn't quite know where my interests within biochemistry, where they would fall. And so I did a couple of rotations. I did a rotation in a fly genetics lab and an NMR lab and a glycoconjugate lab. And then I fell upon my last rotation in a neurobiology, glycobiology lab. And it really brought the biology portion and the chemistry portion together in a way that really made sense to me. And you know, one of the things that I often tell students is that following a path to a career is often a set of choices of I don't like this and I do like this, right? And that's what I did during my rotations in my graduate program. So I had a wonderful experience as a graduate student. But during that even during my project, my research that I was doing, there were several aspects of it. And one of those aspects was something that I liked more than the rest. I realized I don't like things at the molecular level that I can't see. I like things at the cellular level where I can look and find the beauty in the art of biology at the same time. And so I moved from my doctoral program into a postdoctoral program at NIH. My program at NIH was, again, extremely exciting because National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, there is every kind of science imaginable going on. And you could immerse yourself in learning something new every moment of the day, which was not always good for progressing my research, but it was pretty darn exciting to be able to be in an environment like that. So progressed from there to thinking that I was going to go into industry. And at one point in time, somebody asked me to do a lecture in a cell biology class for medical students. And I got some really good feedback. And I realized it's not so bad being in front of the classroom, in front of the class, talking to people and telling, giving them a way to envision knowledge in a way that's understandable to them. And that was a challenge to me to be able, because not everybody understands or learns the same way. And I realized that meeting that challenge of trying to figure out how to convey information in an understandable way to every single student was the kind of challenge that I wanted in my career path. And so I searched around for a university who had a lot of similarities to Hartwick in terms of the physical space. Lehigh is very much built on hills the way Hartwick is. And I found my home there 20 years ago. And this was after swearing to my father, who was an elementary school teacher, I will never be in education. So in any case, that was my path. It was a series of choices along the way of things that I realized I liked and things that I realized I didn't like. And that path seemed meandering at the time. And again, I never could have envisioned where I ended up, but here I am.
Thank you. I had a similar experience actually in graduate school, my first year, where I got to do a rotation in labs, and I really would think it'd be great if more graduate programs did things like that, because as you point out, it's not so much that you necessarily always find out the thing that you like. It's sometimes it's even just as much important to find the things that you don't. And and so yes, I highly appreciate that. So moving on. Mike, do you want to describe your highlight points on your path from Hartwick to where you are now?
Sure. So I think it starts a little bit right before Hartwick, but when I was deciding what major to be going to college, it was always between engineering, architecture, physics, something along that line, and I ended up with physics at Hartwick. So going into school, I always planned on going to graduate school and getting an advanced degree in engineering, especially with physics. So my senior year, we had the graduate school fair, and I went to, and I met Union Graduate School in Schenectady, so not that far from Hartwick. And they had an open house not that long after. So I took a trip with one of my friends from Hartwick to Union Graduate School, and it was very nice, small school, very, 101, just small class size, just like Hartwick. And I really liked that. And during my open house, you actually get to meet with the dean for the engineering program. And he, really opened me up to what they have there. And they had a program that I was really interested in that was half engineering, half business. And at that school, they're very into renewable energies and power systems. So that really caught my eye because I was always interested in solar energy and wind energy and things like that, where, the way the world is right now, we're really pushing that way. So I thought it would be very interesting to pursue that. And I ended up doing that master's and getting the half business degree and half electrical engineering degree. And I really liked it. And as I was going through the business portion of it, I started to like, the business side more and more, interacting with, customers and being more face to face instead of being at a desk and, just crunching numbers. So that made me realize that I want to do more on the business side and management side than the actual engineering. And then the way the graduate school is designed is that the classes are all at night, so you can work during the day. And as I was in school, I was applying to jobs, things that would be in the field, but I didn't have much experience yet. And it kind of ended up working out where I didn't really get anything during school, but right at the end, through a recruiter, I was contacted by my current employer, Technical Fibre Products, which didn't really exactly align with my master's, but I said to myself, it's my first bite, I might as well, go for the interview. And when I took the interview and I learned about what they do there with, I say composites, but like I said, they're an advanced materials company that works in many industries, like I said, aerospace defense, but they do work with, wind energy companies and fuel cells and some alternative energy. So I thought it would maybe be a good mix, as composites are a very forward-thinking industry as well. So it's very, cutting edge, and there's always new developments going on. So I tried it on. I've been there for a year and a half now, and I really enjoy it. So that's my path.
Again, so thank you. It sounds kind of also a little bit like what Susan was saying, where sometimes you don't always know exactly where you're going. All of a sudden, an opportunity sort of goes in front of you, and you say, "Well, let's just see where this brings me. It's interesting right now." And so I think it's easy to see people that have gone along the path to think that, oh, there is a path, that it's clear, it's all signposted, just follow these things. And in reality, it's kind of like you're forging your own path as you go, and you're just trying to take advantage of those opportunities that you never thought of, and then all of a sudden they present themselves. And so I'm starting to see a theme. Dave, do you want to answer on the high points of your path from Hartwick, and particularly because you had a slightly different situation where you kind of took a different turn?
Right. So when I was a senior at Hartwick, was working with you towards getting into grad school, and ultimately got into a PhD program at SUNY Albany, and was working on experimental dark matter physics with a teaching assistantship. And I was a little bit overwhelmed at that time. I should not have really signed myself up for the amount of change that I was going to experience, not necessarily being, ready for that at that time, and thinking that I should, take a step back and work on myself for a little bit in order to approach school at that time properly at that level. And in that, then spent a summer on Indeed. I actually did an interview for a middle school math teaching position for a charter school. I bombed that interview. I am not suited to instruct middle school students. I worked as a teaching assistant at Hartwick and then again in grad school. And so I'm familiar with college level students. There's, a whole nother ball to that game that I just can't catch.
As
And
a middle schoolers, I understand.
yeah. So that really opened my eyes to, okay, maybe another teaching assistant or teaching position in the math world or science world isn't exactly obtainable for me at that time, given my credentials. But while at Hartwick, I took every opportunity I could. Sorry, Mr. Schultz, worked you to the bone to instruct me in as many things as you were willing. And one of the other things that I did actually with Dr. Troist was an independent study in astrophysics research. And in that, I had been introduced to Python by you, Dr. Schultz, only the spring semester of the same year, and then worked as a programming camp counselor for a charity that my brother-in-law's family works. And so I had more experience with Python over the summer and then came in the fall and did that independent study with Dr. Troist, which basically came out to me developing a program in Python for data analytics. And that then leading into grad school, there were several things where programming is kind of just expected in our field. And it's not exactly to a great degree in the sense that it is its own art and does take its own study. And but coming from that background and that experience, I started applying to software positions. And one company that I came across was Reviture. They actually take in recent college grads and especially ones with STEM backgrounds. And it is a 13-week program, really 10 weeks, but there's a little bit of buffer on the outside for you to move there and whatnot, and also to get jobs because they run a coding boot camp, which is a common thing. You can see you pay $10,000 and for 10 or 3 month, depending on the frequency program. And then from there, it's often your responsibility to get, employment from there. It's just a boot camp. However, Reviture is different in the sense that you sign on for a 2-year contract, since they are not only a boot camp, but also a technology consulting firm. And so from then you are linked to their, clientele, which is a pool of clientele that an individual freelance developer doesn't necessarily have the same access, and as well as the network that the consulting firm provides within itself. However, at the end, I actually had my contract sold to Infosys, which is another technology consulting firm, and has been phenomenal, really, in terms of the network that they provide to with at the same time as me being on the job. There are portals within my within the company that allow for me to take courses in new patterns of development and even new languages if there's any need. So in that, I would have to say the highlights are definitely actually low points instead of high points. And that's definitely the bit of advice that I can give, is that allow your low points to be your motivators too.
I thank you. And just so you know, I was more than happy to work with you on all sorts of things, and mainly because I know that the more that you see, the more that you would see, the more options that were ahead of you. Not that I saw this pathway going. I think you could have gone forward and done that, but I'm actually just most happy that you found that path that you found that suits you. And I am seeing a theme amongst all three of you of kind of contingency. Things show up that you didn't expect, and taking those risks and taking a step back and rethinking what your plans were seemed to be kind of a common thread throughout there. So now moving on to our second question, which is, how has this pandemic impacted your work? And do you see some of the adjustments that you're going through becoming standard practices? Like perhaps you're working at home more, and do you see that happening, or how you interact and make go to conferences and things like that? So, Susan.
So as you at Hartwick and the students who are on the video chat right now know, education is changing because of this pandemic. We're facing the same challenges at Lehigh that Hartwick is facing in trying to figure out how to move forward in a way that allows us to make the same connections with our students, offer the same quality of education in new delivery modes, and trying to foster interactions among students as well. All of those things are certainly very challenging in this environment. Yeah, I mean, I teach a hands-on lab course for students, for upper level students. So to move out of the lab in the spring semester was very challenging. It just so happened that fortuitously I had front-loaded a lot of things and had students lined up for independent projects, and we had to change the shape of the independent projects at the end of the semester. But that worked to my advantage, because one of the options that students had was to build new protocols for future labs and for future students. So I now have a new set of experimental ideas to test out in the classroom, which is great. Yeah, I think that this is, I think we have to plan for this being a new norm. Those doing the data analytics right now can probably provide more insight into how often, how frequently something like this may happen. But I think that there are ample opportunities to re-envision education because of this, and re-envision and be innovative in the ways that we both present our information to our students and interact with students in a way that that allows, I guess, allows us to open up our ideas of what it means to be resilient, open up our ideas of what it means to have to really build networks and utilize resources in a different way. So yeah, I think that certainly I've seen that in education, as I'm sure that all of you have as well.
Excellent. Mike?
So I do think there's still a lot of uncertainty around, especially for me, since in my position there's a lot of customer facing and we do go to a lot of conferences. So for that perspective, we don't know how it's going to change yet, how the conferences are going to change, or are we going to eliminate customer visits and just do all Zoom meetings as we're doing now. But for working in the office, I do think that there's going to be a lot of change there, especially for positions like mine where I don't need to be in an office per se. We've been functioning as a team fine through 3 times a week meetings and things like that to keep us just like an office, but remote working does not affect that portion. But a lot of especially selling a material is tough for certain people to not get a feel for it or watch them touch and interact one-on-one with somebody. So we're not really sure how that's going to happen yet. Both our major conferences this year were canceled, and all of our customer visits are on hold. And I know companies are implementing a lot new rules about visitors from other companies coming in, about having eliminating it or having pre-checks. So there's a lot of uncertainty, especially with travel as well. As of right now, I do think there's gonna be a lot change, but it's still not clear exactly how yet.
So do you find your productivity for the parts that aren't out in the field, has it stayed relatively the same, or has it gone up a little bit? Do you feel that working at home is has changed that part?
I think it's changed a little. Things like a lot more focus on the computer, so reports and things like that are probably getting done a lot faster because not in the office chit chatting, but setting up customer visits, things like that, and conference calls has actually been somewhat easier because it's not as hard finding a time to travel, fly somewhere, and meet somebody one to one. It's, hey, are you free at this time? Here's a Zoom call. We'll talk for an hour. So I think it might be more productive in a way.
All right. Yeah, no, I didn't think until you said that about the trade conferences, kind of things that I've gone to, and that tactile experience is important, even if you don't, even if I never really thought about it, it does help to see that. So it's interesting to, hopefully you guys will be able to navigate that. So Dave, what about you? How has the pandemic affected what you've been doing?
So I actually have not had too much of an impact. I started working from home around 50% of the week back in last spring, I want to say. So I've been at the time that everyone else started working from home, I had been already coming into the office around 1 p.m. and leaving at 4 p.m. But the reason being is that I was largely working with offshore in India, and there is during sometimes of the year 10 and a half hours, and then another time of the year 11 and a half hour difference, whether or not it's daylight savings. And with that time difference, then the morning here is evening there, so I would have meetings in the early morning and in my pajamas and just stay in the meeting until sometimes 10, 11 o'clock, and then I would get ready and then go to work, or sometimes I would just take my lunch break and then go to work. And then I had started working at 8 a.m., so I would leave around 4. And then as the year progressed and I moved from being a developer in a test environment to now doing more support work as a developer in a production environment. I started working a lot more independently, and through that, would say it was easier for me to just continue working in the environment I was already than it is for me to take that break to then come into the office just to be there and then do the exact same things. And sometimes there would be some emergency that would happen that would require me to then stay home. So in that, working in software, especially on an international scale, there's a lot of this exact sort of format already. And I'm sure the two professors can attest to that. And so for me, there actually wasn't too strong of a difference. But what I did notice was that a lot of my coworkers that weren't employing the same sort of, stay-at-home regularity, they did have a little bit of a shakeup, and in terms of just their regular schedule. But the infrastructure was already there. We just didn't have a need. So I mean, it didn't change too much for me, but I in terms of it being standard practices, and again, we already had the infrastructure. There's no reason, if I can stay home and I'm already there, there is an initial in-person that's still sometimes needed, or in this case, video conferencing. A lot of people are doing their interviews via video conference. I don't see at least a reason to go back, but I'm a little bit reclusive.
Oh, you're always so outgoing. I doubt that. But no, it's true. Various people, if you have the infrastructure already in place, even if you did have a lot of in-person, on-site kind of things, I think it's easier to go back and do that. So one thing I think we need to think about is how do we make sure that we have a more flexible infrastructure as we go forward. So now the not the last overall question, but the last kind of question that I'm going to pose to the three of you collectively, and thinking back to your time at Hartwick, and hindsight being 2020, what kind of advice would you give yourself or a current student at Hartwick right now, knowing what you know now? And would this advice have changed any now that we are in this COVID-19 world? So Susan, would you like to start us off again?
Oh, let's see. So the first thing I would say to myself would be I would have learned to code.
Ah, good. We're recording this, right? Because
Yep. So, and it is advice that I give to my students all of the time now. If they come in without it, it's the one thing that I recommend that they do, particularly for an engineering background, for moving into an engineering career. But I think it's important for everyone. Uh, I think that probably the biggest thing, and I did it to some extent, but I would have done it more. I would have networked more. I would have taken the opportunity every opportunity to do that. And I know that Hartwick has some fantastic opportunities that they started to build as I was doing, and there were opportunities when I was there. And again, I like many students, you find a professor or two professors that you are comfortable with and that can be your mentors, and that's fantastic. But I think what I would have done then would have been to realize that there are a variety of mentors across a variety of spectrum that you can have, and just because you have one doesn't mean you can't have 74 more, right? So that would be my biggest piece of advice: to continue the networking and to continue to exercise flexibility and adaptability, and as I think all of us have indicated, be receptive to the doors as they're opening, and don't be afraid to take the risks, or as I think David said, to utilize the low points as motivators. Right, we all go through failures, and I think that coming out of Hartwick, I was a little bit afraid of those failures, and I think going into a graduate program and doing research for 5 years really hit home how many times you come up against a brick wall sometimes, and it's, you've got to figure out ways around that wall, right? Or you have to figure out different paths, and sometimes it's just opening up to listening to someone else's point of view that allows you to do that. So yeah,
I've often said we need a journal of failures. That because it always looks so easy and like, oh, this is just the way we know. And I think we need to have a class or something like that and saying, here's how you fail, because you're going to do it more often than succeeding, and that's just fine. So thank you, Mike. So what about you? What advice would you give?
So first, for myself, I'd probably suggest taking more chemistry classes, because I have to do a lot with chemistry, with resins and polymers. But for general students, I would say take a broader range of classes. I feel like we said, with all our passes, and especially our paths and all of our experiences, we see things that open up. I think if people take a broader range of classes, they might, like Susan was saying, you find something you like. And I think me personally, I was kind of a little bit too much focused on the sciences, and I think if students, especially with a liberal arts degree, you take a broader range of classes, you might open your eyes to something you didn't realize you really enjoyed. And now that I'm in more of the business side than I am in the the engineering side and STEM side, I've kind of realized that I kind of wish I took more business classes or things like that in Hartwick. So I think students take a broad range of classes, really get the best experience of that liberal arts education that really shows you everything as much as possible, at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was my experience too as an undergraduate. The more classes, and I wish I hadn't given up on some of my history classes and filled them up with physics now that I'm married to a historian. But here we are. So Dave, what about you?
I guess.
What advice would you give to a younger Dave?
I would say do my homework with better frequency. Yeah, if anything, the value of homework is at least just regularity and, the consistency of, this is the time that you do work, this is the space in which you do work, blah, blah, blah. And because of a lot of what people are experiencing right now is not having an at-home environment that can be productive. And then this sort of a lack of productivity that we're seeing in enterprise in terms of all of these people who are now working from home. And, just it is also a stark reminder of the fact that there are at-home variables that tie into how people can be successful when there is an at-home component. And that is part of, a counterpoint to what I was saying earlier in terms of there not really needing to be a practice to go back to being in person. But there is a lot of psychology to having those sorts of environments so that people can be productive, and the amount that really influences. So in that, I would definitely have to say to myself to be a little bit more prone to setting up an at-home environment right away so that I can do things regularly. And, that starts with homework as a student.
That I swear I wasn't feeding him any of these answers. So
Seriously, we have not talked for years up until
yeah,
just a few minutes ago.
I haven't seen him ever. But no, you actually bring up an interesting point on homework that I will now steal. So future students, you now know who to blame. But I talk about homework as being, kind of that practice. You don't just go out onto the field and play football without practicing, or you don't just go onto a stage and start playing music without practicing. But there's that aspect, though, of self-regulation, of finding that time, of creating time on your own rather than the structure of going to a class or to a meeting or something like that. And I never really thought about the importance of homework in that way. At least not so explicitly. So I appreciate that. My future students might not, but
Yeah, you were always very gracious though, and you should still keep your late homework policy, but maybe cut it off sooner so that you don't get like 50 pages of reports from a student like me.
It's a good policy.
Please don't leave it.
All right. Well, we'll work on that later on. So now, Susan. So one of the questions I have specifically for you, given your background in kind of being an administrative role in graduate school, something that I struggle with. It feels to me that the graduate school process has changed quite a bit since I entered graduate school. Maybe that's just. It's been a long time and I don't remember things, but what advice what sorts of things do you look for in graduate school applicants, and what kind of advice would you give students that are thinking about going to graduate school?
So I would say do your homework. And I don't mean necessarily the homework that you're doing in class right now, but I do mean do your homework in terms of evaluating your potential graduate programs, right? Don't just apply to a school because it has a name or because you think it's got what you want. Do the work to put the work in to determine that that you will have an interest and you will be, there are people there who are doing things that sound exciting to you. Obviously, you do want to look towards, we look for students who have curiosity, and certainly that's necessary in science and engineering, but that's true in any field, right? Going into graduate work means that you're graduate school is for building a knowledge base and extending knowledge, right? And that's, so you have to go in wanting, with curiosity, wanting to expand knowledge as well. I would say that I always look for, as much as you probably students heard this as you were applying to college, the same is true for graduate school. You want to craft a good narrative for yourself, right? You want to write well. So coming from a Hartwick liberal arts background, you have ample opportunities to do to build those skills and being able to those communication skills, both written and oral communication skills. And if you're not the best writer, then at least be willing to have somebody proofread. Right? Certainly, you know, those are logistical things that I think are important. But I really do think that that we're looking for students who have the curiosity and those who can convey that curiosity in a way that allows us to see them as future colleagues. Right? I think that's probably for me I think that's, you know, there's the GRE scores, and you have to those we use those as benchmarks, but most graduate programs are going to look at an application in a holistic way. So they're not based solely on, admission isn't based solely on the metrics of your GPA, and they're not based solely on the GRE scores that you get. So for anyone who's thinking about graduate school, you know, one of the things that I would also say is talk to people, contact the graduate program directors, and we're here for feeding all kinds of information to you that is relevant. I think the other thing that I would say is, you know, everyone has different aspects of that are going to be more important, that are going to be important to them. For some, it's the work. For some, it's the location. For some, it's the you know, the intellectual environment. For some, it's the student body population. How well does the community of graduate students work together? And so I do think that it's important for people who are thinking about graduate school to create a list of needs for themselves, and evaluate kind of systematically how well a graduate program meets their needs. I did not come from an engineering background. I came from a biology, chemistry, and a liberal arts background. I didn't think very much like an engineer, but I do think that systematically going through the criteria by which creating a set of evaluation criteria for yourself is really important. And having those match or having the school match those criteria in a way that makes sense to you is really going to make it most meaningful to the student. From the graduate program standpoint, we want to see students who have gone through that process.
I appreciate the idea of curiosity, because the curiosity kind of begets creativity, and the creativity is going to be true amongst whether or not you are going to art school or you're going to physics. It's all about having that curiosity to try to answer a question that just gets under your skin, and then how do you go about doing that? What is the creative mode of thought that gets you there?
We'll say the other thing, we think about things. We think about the 3 C's. We think about curiosity, connections, and creating value. And I think bringing those 3 things together and sharing that in terms of your application is really important for moving into a graduate program. And that creating value can be, you know, it can be personal value, it can be financial value, it can be societal value, or some combination of all of those, right? But there has to be there has to be that recognition of value for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. That is great. There's some questions that are already coming in, so I want to make sure that we get to those questions as well. And I do the first question in a similar manner to Mike. They are asking, how was your experience at Hartwick contributed to your search for graduate school? What were some things at Hartwick that helped you with getting into graduate school?
I think Hartwick does a good job of you know, really leaning on the student to do a lot of work by themselves. I know from my graduate degree, it was much more focused on, you know, individual learning than some of classroom learning, because it was much more, you know, 3 hours one night of a week and see you next week. And there's not, you know, really office hours to lean on as much as Hartwick and really get that interaction. But I think Hartwick still does a good job with that of making the student do as much effort as they can, and having the resource there to fall back on. And I think that's probably the biggest thing for me was really growing from, you know, high school into college to graduate school is really, you know, leaning more myself to learn than being, you know, kind of just told the information. I had to do a lot of by myself to teach and, you know, really grow my understanding.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Perry, we have a question for you. At Lehigh, what are you finding with the admissions for grad school? Are you seeing an increase because of COVID, students going to grad school?
We have seen an uptick in the number of master's applicants, late master's applicants, right? It hasn't changed our PhD, our doctoral program admissions. That's done fairly early. Most applications for PhD programs will be due somewhere between December and the end of January. So yeah, I think that the uncertainty in the job market, you know, right about the time people were graduating, I think it depends. I will say I think it's industry dependent, or industry sector dependent, because you know, you find that many students in majoring in business and finance and economics, there's a lot of job offers going out early in the fall, and engineering offers, we see cycles in when offers are going out to our students and to our graduating seniors. And the mechanical engineering, electrical engineering jobs, they may be late October through December. And then biomedical engineering and biology, they tend to be late spring. And so depending on where students were in the cycle of having, you know, job interviews and job offers coming out, when COVID came to bear on all of us, that really I think affected applications. So for us, in terms of the biological science, in terms of the sciences and bioengineering, biomedical engineering, I think there's an uptick because of it. And yet, I think that things are starting to open up. So in that realm, because a lot of companies in that realm have pivoted, right? They put things on hold until they determine what their pivots were going to be, and a lot of companies have pivoted to address this particular challenge. And so I think things are opening up again.
Well, it's good to, I know we're seeing that all across the board, which is nice. We do have another question, and it's, I think, let's go to David. David, they're wondering, what experiences did you have at Hartwick outside of the academic that really helped you in your professional pursuits? So were there classes or clubs or activities that were instrumental?
So before coming to Hartwick, since I transferred in as a junior, had taken an intro to programming course. And then from there, though, I was only, you know, just minorly exposed to programming the way that, you know, every other student was. But it was through, as I mentioned, the opportunities that my professors helped me create for myself, through taking on the intro to astrophysics research, which I, you know, was just basically doing Python programming for the entirety, which was somewhat random that was the assignment that Dr. Choi had given me. It could have been anything. It could have been entirely math-based and theoretical, but he gave me a Python assignment. And so spending a semester doing that, and then not only, you know, just having done that, but then as Dr. Perry was mentioning, talking about that, then when I was applying to grad school, it was definitely instrumental in terms of showing that I had the code background that a lot of students do lack, that Dr. Perry also mentioned. And then, though that didn't end up being relevant to what I do now directly, it did help open my eyes that I thoroughly enjoy programming. That's something that I definitely didn't get to see how much I could enjoy until I spent that much time doing it on that level at that age as well. So there was a little bit of, maturity difference between when I first took intro to programming as a freshman to me doing an independent study in astrophysics research as a senior. And that was in part of the amount of opportunity that Hartwick presented that then helped shape the direction that I ultimately ended up taking when I said, okay, well, I am not pursuing physics directly, but I was educated in this, at least to a degree that made it so that I am able to then step into this field, and did.
That's great. Thank you.
David, real quick, did you have any programming experience before you got to college? Or was that introductory programming class your freshman year or elsewhere? Was that really your first experience?
So I had taken a computer course in middle school and was introduced to basic, just, manipulating pixels and whatnot, but entirely at the direction of a teacher who, knew about as much as what we were doing as we did.
You weren't self-motivated as a programmer for all these years. It just, you kind of came into it as in college and now kind of that's where your career is going.
Right. And so I had had a little bit of exposure, especially those who are were on MySpace when I was, were exposed to HTML, and just so there was a little bit of, social influence in that sense. The fact that socially, the social media platform at the time involved actively writing code, was, an exposure that everyone in my generation, if they had those privileges, experienced. And so, to isolate it and then to just, just that one experience of taking that course in college isn't exactly, a true picture in modern times when it comes down to the topic of software. So, but no, I had also had other influences. My siblings have friends who were developers, and, I was exposed to the concept, but never pursued it myself. No, not until college.
Great.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, it was great. I'm glad you pulled it out of him. We know how honest he is already. So I am going to turn it over to Mike. We only have a few more questions, but I'd love to hear from you, Mike, what your thoughts were. You talked a little bit about you wish you'd taken more courses. Was there something, or, doing other things more broader while you were in college? Was there anything in particular that you did do that you were really glad that you did that helped you?
Well, since everyone's talking about coding, I really enjoyed the one coding class I took, and I do wish I maybe took more. But I think since there's a liberal arts degree at Hartwick, taking a broader range. I found one history professor that I really liked, Professor Wallace, and I took 2 classes with him. I really, really enjoyed it. And the only reason why I took the class because I needed to take a credit, but I found to really like the teacher and really connected with the material he taught. And I think people who you do take that broad range will find a case like that, or find a case like the one coding class I really took, and you really you'll remember that, and I think that's really good as a student to grow. And like I said, I took one business class, and I wish I took maybe some more of those. But I think really just experiencing more, you get a better chance to get that history class that I really enjoyed, and really grow yourself.
Yeah. Great, thank you. We don't have much time. We only have 3 more minutes left, but I always like to leave it, and we've kind of touched base on it, but we only get 1 sentence on this one. So what would be your best advice to a current student right now as they're thinking about doing grad school or going out in the job market? What would be your best advice for them? And I'm going to let anybody jump in.
Do your homework.
Still firmly, I was going to keep my mouth shut.
Be flexible and bounce ideas off as many people as you can. Get a broad set of points of view.
Yeah, I have to really echo that. You mentioned networking, and that is definitely one of the best aspects. A lot of people leading into adulthood struggle with asking for help, and having a network that you can that you trust and can rely on really helps ease that process of learning to ask people for help. But then also, don't be shy to ask for help. A lot of the network that I built for myself at my job has been because I was asking for help.
Yeah, I was going to say, find lots and lots of mentors. That's what I did, and then learn how to trust, listen to them, and then learn to trust yourself when you're sorting through all of those things. But get as many mentors as you can.
For the students that are listening right now, we have four wonderful mentors you can reach out to.
Well, and I will say, your Hartwick professors will continue to be your mentors even many, many years later. So you can still reach out to them, I'm sure.
Once you're my student, you're forever my student.
Exactly.
It was only about 5 years ago that I finally stopped harassing my undergraduate professors. I think that's just because.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
Probably last thing I would say is don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid of the word no. I think that really helps you grow.
That's a great way to end this. Oh my gosh, this is a wonderful evening. I can't thank you enough all. Dr. Schultz, thanks for hosting it. Michael, David, Dr. Perry, you were all amazing. So thank you so much. And just a reminder to the students, email me or let a professor know that you want to connect with any one of these individuals. Be happy to make that happen. If you want to email me, jones3@hartwick.edu. Thank you so much for this evening. I just want to point out that we have only 2 more in June of these network chats, and they're both going to take place this Sunday. From the first one's going to be 12 to 1, and it's seeing COVID-19 through the lens of an AI and cybersecurity. And then right directly after that at 1:30, vying for attention, the environment at the forefront. Like I said, and Paula Lee said, we'll be continuing these on in the future. So if anybody wants to volunteer as a speaker, please reach out to us. And we need mentors for our students. So that's another way to help us. But thank you very much. Everybody have a great evening, and stay safe and strong. Take care.
Take good care. Thank you so much.